Hello everyone, welcome to the Lightning Ball channel. If you haven't yet subscribed to my channel, please do so and activate the notification bell. Your support fuels my continued efforts. In our previous episode, as Rimuru chose to confront Veldanava head-on and buy time, Feldway stepped forward and bravely fought his own lord one-on-one, suffering severe injuries in the process. Yet, thanks to the slime cells within his body, Feldway miraculously managed to hold on far longer than anyone expected. Diablo, still harboring resentment over the fact that the Feldway he hated most had received those noble slime cells, complained as usual, only for his words to be accidentally overheard by TenSura. And so, the three primordial demon beauties each used their own methods to obtain rewards from Rimuru-sama as well, aka slime cells. In this episode, the perspective shifted to Guy's battle with Ivarage, taking place at the same time. This clash was also one of the major highlights of TenSura Volume 23. Guy displayed incomparable combat awareness and overwhelming strength that left Milim, Velzard, Velgrind, and Veldora all stunned. And at last, the third god-level ultimate skill of the series finally appeared, Guy's God of Abyss. So, let's get started. What Guy demonstrated was the composure of an absolute powerhouse. Against Ivarage, it could only be described as a one-sided domination. He suppressed Ivarage with overwhelming superiority, casually forcing her back toward the direction of Star Palace. Those watching were deeply shaken. Velzard, of course, was brimming with pride, excitedly boasting about the strength of her man. When Guy effortlessly severed Ivarage's destructive light beam, Velzard even turned into live commentary, remarking that if Guy could cut through her own ultimate move, White Absorb, then something like that beam was hardly worth mentioning. Velgrind, by contrast, wore a look of pure shock. Back in episode 137, she had taken that very attack head-on and paid a heavy price, one she had yet to fully recover from. Though she was irritated by Velzard endlessly praising her man, this was when she truly realized just how terrifyingly strong Guy was, and that was simply fact. Even though Ivarage wielded the Genesis-grade weapon Karma, while Guy held the equally ranked world, the gap in technique was like heaven and earth. Ivarage's improvised swordsmanship was riddled with openings in front of Guy, leaving her utterly overwhelmed. Milim and Veldora immediately began scrambling for excuses. Milim whined loudly, complaining that she and Ivarage had fought so desperately. So why did Guy look so relaxed? By that logic, Guy seemed stronger than her, which was completely unacceptable. Veldora focused on finding excuses of his own, insisting that his main role had been stalling, and that he had not even fought seriously. Milim quickly added that she herself had just been too exhausted. The two of them desperately tried to gloss over how cornered they had been earlier. Velzard mercilessly teased Veldora, and under his sister's pressure, he instantly behaved himself, no longer daring to dance around the danger zone, and hurriedly praised Guy's techniques as super cool, barely escaping further ridicule. Guy paid no attention to the reactions of the spectators. He continued methodically driving Ivarage into a corner. He knew full well that he needed to end this quickly, so he could rush to Rimuru's aid. After all, Rimuru's opponent was the creator god Veldanava. Of course, if Guy had known that Rimuru had actually handed the task over to Feldway and was merely observing from the sidelines, he would have been furious. Returning to the battle itself, Guy's strength came not only from raw stats, but from his mind. He was constantly observing with cold precision. First was his mentality as a true powerhouse. No matter the opponent, Guy never grew arrogant or careless. He identified weaknesses with pinpoint accuracy and even analyzed the enemy's skills, turning them to his own advantage. Second was his limitless endurance. Like Diablo, Guy could draw magicules directly from the atmosphere and convert them into output. That meant he did not need to consume much of his own energy to unleash full-power attacks, allowing him to fight continuously. Even after a prolonged battle with Velzard, Guy had barely expended anything, aside from slight fatigue that could be ignored. This extraordinary combat sense was Guy's greatest weapon. Meanwhile, the suppressed Ivarage finally recalled memories from long ago, of when she had still been a pure beast, beaten senseless by Guy and driven into the other world. For the first time in the story, Ivarage spoke in full sentences, bluntly declaring that she hated Guy. Guy replied without hesitation that, coincidentally, he hated Ivarage as well. As those memories resurfaced, Ivarage's presence changed. She transformed from a playful child into a monster hungry to learn. Although Guy's slashes remained effective, Ivarage endured them through sheer Godspeed regeneration. Guy attempted to stack damage over time, but that required time, and what he needed right now was a swift conclusion. Just as he searched for a decisive opening, another mutation occurred. Within the holy remains of Lucia that Ivarage had devoured, fragments of authority still lingered. The voice of the world echoed within her mind. Ivarage had acquired the ultimate skill, Lord of Wisdom. Yes, the very Lord of Wisdom once possessed by Rimuru. Lucia, as a saintess, had once held one of the 7 virtues, Lord of Wisdom. With Ivarage obtaining it, she gained immense, pure computational and analytical power. A beast that once relied solely on brute force now possessed a supercomputer-like intellect. Guy instantly sensed the danger. His plan for a quick kill had clearly failed, and for the time being, rushing to Rimuru's aid was no longer an option. Their battle escalated into a clash of blades at the highest level. The speed of attack and defense was so extreme that even those who had not reached the million-class super-awakened tier lacked the right to even witness it. Any ordinary being who wandered into the battlefield would be pulverized instantly by the mere shockwaves of their sword pressure. And yet, this earth-shaking confrontation was merely the prologue to the true battle yet to come. Ivarage was evolving in real time at a truly absurd speed. She wasn't just copying Guy's techniques, she was extracting combat memories directly from this Lucia's body. Lucia, as Rudra's younger sister and Veldanava's wife, had already transcended lifespan limits while alive, and was a super-awakened being with existence points exceeding 1 million. While her swordsmanship didn't quite reach Rudra's level, it was still unquestionably first-rate. Ivarage instantly assimilated those techniques, analyzing the infons of everything she had devoured and faithfully reproducing every useful skill. With this terrifying learning ability, her power surged explosively, rapidly closing the gap with Guy. So much so that even Guy grew irritated and complained about how ridiculous her growth rate was. His original plan to end the fight quickly had completely derailed. Mid-battle, Ivarage suddenly extended her free left hand. At the instant Guy sharply retreated, a condensed destruction beam, moving at sublight speed, fired out, piercing through the position he had just occupied and slamming straight into the wall of Heaven Tower, triggering a violent tremor. This condensed beam was fundamentally different from the earlier wide-area attacks. The same amount of energy had been compressed into an extremely small point, like replacing a flat impact with a needle tip, causing its penetration and lethality to skyrocket exponentially. The 4 spectators reacted differently. First came the bravado duo. Milam exclaimed that the attack rivaled Drago Nova in power, while Veldora confidently claimed he could tank it head-on. Then came the rational group. Velgrind and Velzard were visibly exasperated by the 2 youngsters, calmly pointing out that while spiritual life forms wouldn't die instantly even if their bodies were pierced, since they lacked vital organs, regenerating a body consumed enormous energy. Therefore, dodging rather than tanking, as Guy had done, was the most efficient tactic. But Guy's evasion was actually bait. Seeing him dodge, Ivarage mistakenly believed she had gained the upper hand. Like a child who had just discovered a new toy, she relied on her seemingly bottomless magicule reserves and began firing condensed destruction beams in a frantic barrage. Sublight speed beams rained down like a storm, accompanied by her innocent yet cruel laughter. Guy weaved through the dense barrage with ease. By observing Ivarage's hand movements, sensing fluctuations in the air, and even detecting the scent of atmospheric combustion, he precisely predicted the trajectory of every single beam. At the perfect moment, Guy slipped through the web of light and thrust his demon sword, whirled, straight toward Ivarage core. But this, too, was exactly what Ivarage had been waiting for. It was her trap. High-density energy had already been stockpiled in her chest. At the instant Guy closed in and could no longer evade, she confidently declared victory and fired a destruction beam at point-blank range. Guy, however, was one step ahead. Facing what should have been a killing blow, he merely smiled calmly and remarked that Ivarage was still far too naive. In the next instant, something shocking occurred. The beam that should have pierced Guy vanished into thin air. Immediately after, whirled past cleanly through Ivarage's chest. The truth was simple. Guy had already copied and reproduced Rimuru's ultimate skill, Lord of Gluttony. The reason he had chosen to dodge earlier was to make Ivarage believe her beams were effective. In reality, any externally released energy attack was nothing more than nourishment to Guy. By devouring that point-blank beam, his previously negligible energy loss was instantly restored, returning him to peak condition. Guy arrogantly declared that Ivarage was still just as disappointing as ever. The strike wasn't fatal, but it utterly shattered Ivarage's sense of superiority. The plunge from heaven to hell, combined with the vivid pain transmitted through her body, awakened distant memories of the time when this very red-haired demon had beaten her senseless and driven her into the other world. The face that bore Lucia's peerless beauty twisted with extreme hatred as Ivarage locked her gaze onto Guy and let out a venomous roar. At that moment, she finally stopped treating this as a game, and for the first time truly acknowledged Guy as a mortal enemy who had to be eliminated. As her rage exploded, countless lights began to envelop her body, heralding yet another mutation. What followed was a clear demonstration of Guy's absolute command as a battlefield commander. On the surface, Veldora and the others seemed to be merely watching, but in reality, they had been receiving Guy's commands via thought communication the entire time. Guy ordered everyone to prepare for full-power attacks and give it everything they had. Faced with Guy's imperious attitude, Veldora and Milim instinctively began to complain. Veldora grumbled about Guy putting on airs, while Milim protested that Guy was actually giving her orders. They both acted uncooperative, until an icy chill instantly dropped the temperature of the battlefield. With a bone-chilling smile, Velzard asked whether Veldora and Milim had any objections to the orders. Under the overwhelming pressure of this big sister, the two who had been so outspoken a moment earlier immediately backtracked, hastily declaring they had no complaints at all and would, of course, help. They obediently shut up and entered standby. On the battlefield, Guy still wore a relaxed smile as he effortlessly evaded Ivarage's relentless barrage of condensed destruction beams. Veldora couldn't help voicing his doubts, bluntly pointing out that Guy seemed too careless and should be more vigilant. Velzard naturally allowed no one, especially this unlucky little brother, to question her man. She coldly remarked that Veldora had no right to compare himself to Guy, and scolded him for using his limited common sense to speculate about the mindset of a superior being. Veldora was utterly helpless. Though he wanted to argue that he was strong too, he swallowed the words for the sake of survival. Milim, on the other hand, looked genuinely worried. As Ivarage attack accuracy kept improving, Milim, fully aware of its power, grew increasingly anxious, fearing that Guy might end up playing with fire. Only Velgrind remained silent. She neither wanted to provoke Velzard nor let her guard down, staying fully prepared to provide support. With her wealth of experience, she maintained a tight defensive posture, while already cultivating a finishing move within herself, the most stable response on the field. At last, the decisive moment arrived. A destruction beam struck Guy squarely in the chest. At that instant, the same thought flashed through both Veldora's and Milim's minds. Felt like saying, "See, told you he'd mess up." They both assumed Guy had finally slipped due to overconfidence and were just about to criticize him and suggest a joint attack. But before either could speak, Guy's command rang out, "Now!" Complaints or doubts aside, their bodies moved faster than their minds. The four powerhouses unleashed their fully charged finishing moves simultaneously, without the slightest delay, with flawless precision. Milim released a full-power Dragonova with such overwhelming output that the equipment on her hands was pushed to the brink of destruction. Veldora unleashed Thunderstorm, humanoid form version 2, thrusting both palms forward with wrists aligned like a dragon's jaws, a move he had once intended to use on Stampede Milim, but had been stopped. Its energy density far exceeded his dragon form. Velgrin fired Cardinal Acceleration at maximum output without hesitation. Velzard acted even faster than the rest, activating Whiteout Absorb first. Just as Guy had planned, the four world-shaking ultimate attacks overlapped and struck Ivarage at the exact same time and coordinates. Guy openly praised the devastating perfection of this coordinated strike, showering them with compliments. Though Veldora and Milim felt his praise still carried that annoying air of superiority, they couldn't deny the flawless result, and reluctantly held their tongues. Guy had no intention of handing over the finishing touch. Facing the apocalyptic energy unleashed by Veldora, Milim, Velgrind, and Velzard, he naturally activated Lord of Gluttony Beelzebub. He devoured the rampant energy engulfing the battlefield. Inside his body, he performed an almost unbelievable feat of fine control, integrating most of the energy while deliberately isolating Milim's Drago Nova, wrapping it around himself. In the end, all that power was reconstructed into a single, directional oscillation, spiraling around Ivarage like a vortex of annihilation. Facing this ultimate power, the smile vanished from Ivarage's face in an instant. She finally realized that if she were struck head-on, survival would be impossible. Yet, what confused her was that this lethal blow was not immediately unleashed. It merely coiled around her, poised, but restrained. The spectators' reactions, however, diverged sharply. First came the indignant duo, Veldora and Milim. Both were stunned that their own power had been repurposed by Guy in a way that looked uncannily similar to Rimuru's methods, leaving one thinking, "This is unbelievable," and the other fuming that it was way too much. Then there was the resigned pair, Velgrind and Velzard, whose expressions carried more helplessness than anger. They had finally realized that if Guy could reach this level, then from the very beginning, Ivarage had never stood a chance. This once again validated Guy's philosophy of games and warfare. Just like his past match with Rudra, if he truly wanted to end it, he could have done so at any moment. He insisted on proxy battles because only contests accompanied by real risk were interesting. This twisted preference was in fact a shared mindset and guilty pleasure among all primordial demons. Guy finally revealed his trump card, declaring that he would let Ivarage taste death itself. The encircling destructive energy instantly fused into her body, erupting into the true ultimate technique, Catastrophe Eclipse. This was a skill brimming with malice. Though it resembled Moss's Infinite Eater, its essence was entirely different. It converted the injected energy inside the target into continuous damage that could stack and be fired repeatedly. The most terrifying aspect was that the damage could never heal. Physical regeneration, recovery magic, even the energy required for instinctive and natural healing were all invalidated, endlessly drained by the skill until the target was forcibly driven to exhaustion and death. Even more horrifying was the composition of this attack's energy. It contained not only Guy's maximum output, but also fully integrated the finishing blows of 4 true dragon-level powerhouses. This power was transformed into a form of negative energy capable of erasing all things. Strikingly similar to Void, we could call it pseudo-Void though, yet controllable and far more stable, tightly binding Ivarage. This single move not only decided the outcome of the battle before them, but also unraveled a historical mystery. Watching it unfold, Milim finally understood how Guy and Ramirez had once subdued her during her rampage. It was precisely this balance-maintaining art, one that weakened overwhelming power without outright destruction, that allowed Guy to control the situation even as Milim's strength skyrocketed infinitely. Veldora stared in stunned disbelief, summing it up with one word: absurd. The The scene also stirred vague memories of his own defeat at Guy's hands, reaffirming that Guy was an existence never to be provoked. Of course, compared to Guy, Veldora was still far more afraid of his two sisters. Ivarage let out a shrill, unwilling screech. Her entire body was now carved with cursed marks, and her immense magicule reserves were steadily leaking from the wounds. As long as Guy did not voluntarily release his authority, this state would persist forever. No matter how vast her energy reserves were, Ivarage could only wait for them to run dry in endless agony, just as Guy had foretold, experiencing, for the first time since her birth, truly soul-rending pain. Driven mad by the torment, Ivarage lashed out blindly at Guy with her sword. The attack, utterly lacking in technique, was easily deflected and smashed into the wall behind her. Cracks like a spider's web spread across the supposedly indestructible walls of Heaven Tower. This wasn't merely physical damage, it was a disturbance at the level of law itself. Guy laughed heartily, proudly declaring that his Catastrophe Eclipse could even negate the absolute laws established by Veldanava. Guy was able to achieve this because his ultimate skill, Lord of Pride, Lucifer, had undergone transcendent evolution. The trigger for this evolution was Guy observing Rimuru's use of alteration on Velzard. Through sheer talent and understanding, Guy reconstructed his own authority, evolving it into the ultimate skill god of Abyss, Nodens. This power surpassed all existing authorities, touching the realm of gods themselves. It integrated every force Guy had mastered so far into a single system. The details of this ability would be explained later in the episode. As he looked at the mortally wounded Ivarage, Guy conducted a calm assessment. He concluded that without the combined finishing strikes of 4 true dragon-class powerhouses, defeating this monster would have been nearly impossible. Even in a one-on-one scenario, Guy was confident he would eventually win, but it would have been a prolonged war of attrition with incalculable collateral damage. Achieving this result while minimizing losses through allies and terrain was, in his view, sheer luck. What truly unsettled Guy, however, was Rimuru. Using his newly evolved authority only deepened his realization of just how terrifying Rimuru was. Rimuru's existence had fundamentally altered the nature of combat. With soul gluttony, magicule quantity no longer determined victory. Any externalized attack became nothing more than delivered food. Combined with absolute defense and teleportation, as long as an opponent couldn't disrupt recovery, defeat was impossible. Guy realized that Rimuru had already possessed such authority long ago, an absurd, almost incomprehensible monster. If Guy himself hadn't awakened God of Abyss, he might have been dragged into a grueling struggle against an energy monster like Ivarage. As for Ivarage, despite suffering fatal damage, she did not perish. On the contrary, pain became the catalyst for her evolution. First came the redefinition of pain itself. To Ivarage, ordinary pain didn't exist. True agony was the emptiness caused by the loss of magicules, a freezing sense of deprivation and discomfort. Second was the severing of bonds. She clearly sensed her connection to the cryptid children being cut off. They were dead, and this loss awakened emotions she had never felt before. Third was the eruption of feelings. Why? Anger, resentment, hatred surged within her like a flood. Finally came the continuation of evolution. Ivarage had never understood emotion before, but now she was greedily learning from this heart-rending experience. These surging emotions became the most violent fuel, filling her emptiness. Guy had won the tactic, but he had not truly ended the enemy. The evil god Ivarage was now transforming into something even more terrifying, forged within the raging flames of anger and hatred. Alright, that was all for this video. God of Abyss also appeared in the web novel, but only near the very end and mentioned in a single line without detail. In Volume 23, however, its full mechanics were finally revealed. This skill was born from Guy, imitating the process he observed when Rimuru altered Velzard, optimizing all of his own abilities. As a result, It incorporated many elements reminiscent of Rimuru's skill set: imaginary space, skill creation, skill duplication, and skill storage. His former Lord of Gluttony was likewise refined into Soul Gluttony. In essence, God of Abyss felt like a partial replication and fusion of Rimuru's core abilities. That said, it did not include Nihility Collapse, previously translated as Imaginary Collapse, though the Slime Wiki has since updated the term. More importantly, Nihility Collapse's charge was something Rimuru and Seal completed over endless ages at the end of time and spaces itself. All in all, Guy gained an unprecedented power boost. Simply by observing Rimuru alter Velzard once, he was able to grasp and reproduce such profound mechanisms. An utterly outrageous feat. In our next episode, we'll begin Chapter 4 of TenSura Volume 23, the true core of the novel, Rimuru's confrontation with Veldanava. We'll see Seal's absolute confidence. Defeating Veldanava would be easy for Rimuru, but instead, Seal sought a perfect resolution through goodwill rather than brute force alone. The next episode would be just as exciting. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe. Your support was greatly appreciated. See you in the next one.